The most frightening thing about this story is how ordinary the beginning was. Regular customer, regular order, regular interaction at the door, nothing that would tell you, standing on a stranger's front step holding a bag of food, that what was being constructed on the other side of that door was something that would follow you to work. I was 23 when this started, working at a pizza place, mostly evenings, the kind of job I had taken to cover expenses while I figured out the next part of my life. I had been doing it long enough to have a sense of the regulars, the people who ordered every Friday, the families who always tipped well, the handful of addresses I had mentally flagged as ones to get in and out of quickly, without making conversation. He became a regular gradually, not all at once, orders every few days, then more frequently, then what started to feel like every other night. The orders were always the same, a specific combination, enough food for one person, paid in cash, at a house in a neighborhood that I had delivered to many times without incident. He was in his late 40s. He was clearly struggling with addiction. The signs were visible, in the way that becomes unmistakable to anyone who has worked enough evening shifts in enough neighborhoods. The first time he said something that registered as wrong was about 2 months in. A comment at the door that crossed a line I had not realized was there until it was crossed. Too personal. The kind of comment that tells you a person has been paying more attention than you knew. I smiled and I left and I told myself it was nothing. Then he called the store asking for me by name. Not asking to place an order, asking whether I was working. My manager told him I was out on a run. He asked when I would be back. My manager told him he could not give out that information. He said he would call back. He called back 3 more times that evening. I had been in delivery long enough to know that when a customer starts tracking your schedule, the pattern matters more than any individual incident. I told my manager. He noted it. The next time the man came to the door, a delivery I had not been able to avoid because I was the only driver on and the address came up. He said things that I will not fully repeat, except to tell you that he told me he loved me and asked me to go with him. He said this as if it were a reasonable thing to say to a delivery driver standing on your front step, as if we had an understanding. I said no. I went back to my car. I told my manager what had happened, and then the in-person visits started. He began coming to the store, not to place orders, to see if I was there. He would come in and ask the staff directly, "Is she working today?" If I was not there, he would wait for a while and then leave. If I was there, he would sit at the counter. He would not order anything. He would simply sit and talk to me. And the things he said became stranger and more pressured with each visit. The gap between what was real and what was happening in his perception of our relationship widening with every conversation. He told me he thought about me constantly. He told me he knew I would change my mind. He told me he just needed me to give him a chance. I want to tell you that the store handled this decisively and immediately. They did not. The first few weeks were characterized by the organizational paralysis that happens when nobody quite wants to be the one to confront a customer who has not technically done anything that would satisfy the legal threshold of a formal action. He had not threatened me. He had not followed me to my car. He had not done anything except show up and sit and say things that frightened me in a way that I struggled to explain to people who had not been in the room when he said them. It was the certainty in his voice that frightened me. Not anger, not aggression, certainty. He was certain of something about us that existed only in his own mind. And the certainty was so complete that no response I gave seemed to register as a boundary. My manager eventually told him he could not come to the store unless he was placing an order. He started placing small orders as a pretext. He was put on the do not deliver list. He stopped being able to reach me directly at the store. He did not stop for some time after that. He found other ways, other evenings, other drivers who would mention in passing, "Someone was asking about you tonight." Other phone calls from numbers I did not recognize. The specific, exhausting work of managing someone's unwanted attention while continuing to do a job that put me on the public road and behind the door of his house. I left that job eventually, not because of him alone, but because of what that job had taught me about the particular vulnerability of delivery work, about what it means to go to strangers' homes alone at night, to hand your face and your name and your schedule to people you have never properly met, to become a known and expected presence in someone's evening routine. Most customers are fine. The vast majority are ordinary, decent people who want their food and their evening. But the structure of the job, the aloneness of it, the regularity of it, the access it gives to a driver's face and voice and schedule, is an invitation to the small percentage who are not fine. And you don't know which percentage a new regular belongs to until you are already in it. I think about the word regular now differently than I used to. In most contexts, it means reliable and comfortable and known. In delivery work, after that year, it means something else. It means someone who has had enough time to watch, and enough time is all some people need. I want to tell you about the night I understood, really understood, in my body, before my brain caught up, what it feels like to walk into something that was set up specifically for you. Not an accident, not a misunderstanding. A setup. I had been doing food delivery for about 8 months at that point, working nights mostly, the kind of grinding, late shift routine that turns unfamiliar streets familiar and teaches you things about a city that daylight never shows you. I had learned the neighborhoods. I had learned which apartment complexes buzzed you in without hesitation, and which ones made you stand at the gate for 4 minutes while someone decided whether to answer. I had learned which rural addresses were genuinely rural, and which ones used a rural-sounding description to obscure something else. I thought I was getting good at reading a delivery before I arrived. I thought I could feel a bad one coming. I was not as good at it as I thought. It was a Tuesday night in late October, cold and drizzling, the kind of rain that is not heavy enough to matter, but relentless enough to make everything miserable. The order came through around 10:30. A standard food order, nothing unusual. The address listed as a residential property on the outer edge of my delivery zone. Rural area. I had delivered to rural addresses before. I started the drive. The route took me out of the last of the suburban streets and into the kind of road that gets narrower as you go. The kind where the GPS is giving you instructions 3 seconds after you needed them. The kind where your headlights are the only light visible in any direction. I turned onto a gravel road. My headlights moved slowly across the tree line, across the deep ruts in the gravel, across the dark shapes of what might have been machinery or might have been something else in the fields on either side. And at the end of the gravel road, where the address was supposed to be, I saw a figure just standing in the dark at the end of the road in the beam of my headlights. A person in a black hoodie facing me, not moving. I told myself it was someone waiting for the delivery. I told myself it was a person who had ordered food and had come outside to meet the driver at the road, which some people did. I drove slowly. The figure did not move toward me. Stood. I reached the property. I pulled into what I assumed was the drive. I stopped, and that was when I registered the house. No lights on. Not just one room dark, completely dark. Every window, boarded windows. 2 of them, covered with the kind of plywood that goes up when a property has been abandoned, weathered, and pale against the darkness of the front of the house. No vehicles anywhere on the property. The particular stillness of a place that has not been lived in for a long time. I sat in the car for a second, hands on the wheel, the engine still running, and I let all of those things assemble themselves into a picture. Boarded windows, no lights, no cars, dark road with a person standing at the end of it. And then I saw him, coming from the adjacent field to the left of the property. A man walking at a deliberate pace across the open ground, heading directly toward where I was parked. And as he got close enough for my headlights to reach him properly, I saw him reach to his waistband, and I saw him tuck something in. I did not wait to understand what it was. I threw the car into reverse. I reversed down that gravel road faster than gravel roads are designed to accommodate, hit the main road, put it in drive, and I did not slow down for a very long time. I reported the address to the platform I was driving for. I reported it to the local non-emergency line. I never heard back anything specific. I never found out who placed the order. I never found out if the man reached where my car had been parked and found nothing there. I think about the design of it now. The fake address in a rural area on a dark night when I would arrive alone with no one nearby. The figure at the end of the road to confirm a car was coming. The man positioned in the field, ready to approach from the side. The abandoned property chosen because it had no witnesses, no lights, no neighbors, no reason for anyone to be there. Someone had thought about this. Someone had thought about the specific mechanics of what they were doing. And they had used a food delivery app to do it, to put an unsuspecting person alone on a dark road at an address that no longer existed, at an hour when no one would hear anything. I drove for 2 more weeks after that. Then I stopped. I still think about the moment I reversed down that road, about the 1.5 seconds between seeing him reach for his waistband and my foot, finding the accelerator. I do not know what would have happened if my instincts had been a 1.5 seconds slower. I do not let myself fully think about that. But I know, and I think the man crossing the field knew too. I have told this story more times than I can count, not because I like telling it, I don't, but because every time I hear someone complain about a delivery driver taking too long or sitting in the car before coming to the door, I tell this story. Because there are things that delivery drivers learn about the job that customers never think about. And one of those things is that a delivery driver's car, sitting unattended in a driveway or on a dark street while the driver walks to a door 40 feet away, is a target, a predictable, reliable time target. You know exactly how long the driver will be away from the car. You know, they will have their hands full. You know, they will be focused on the door, on the customer, on the transaction. You know, they will have their back to the street for 45 seconds to 2 minutes. Depending on how long it takes someone to answer, that car is unattended with a driver who cannot see it. Someone understood this. Someone had thought it through clearly enough to build a plan around it. I had been delivering for about a year at the point this happened. It was a weeknight, mid-autumn, the kind of quiet evening shift where the hours pass slowly and you develop a kind of autopilot that moves you from address to address without requiring much conscious attention. The order came in like any other order, a residential address in a neighborhood I had delivered to before. Not dangerous, not obviously problematic, the kind of suburb that is indistinguishable from 10,000 other suburbs at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday night. I parked, I got out, I took the bag, I walked to the door, I knocked, I waited, nothing. I knocked again, waited, checked the address on my phone against the number on the door. Correct address, knocked a 3rd time. At about the 45-second mark of standing at that door, something made me look back at my car. I cannot tell you what it was. A sound, maybe, or the particular absence of sound, or the animal instinct that sometimes fires when something in your peripheral environment has changed, and your conscious mind has not yet cataloged what. My car door was open, and a person was leaning into the driver's side, moving quickly with the specific efficiency of someone who has done this before and is working against a clock. I shouted, not a word, just a sound. The person looked up, looked directly at me, and ran down the street, around the corner, and gone within about 6 seconds. I ran back to my car. My phone was gone from the cup holder where I had left it. My wallet, which I had stupidly left in the center console, was gone. Nothing else. They had taken what was immediately accessible and left because they knew they had 45 seconds. Not more. I stood on the street and looked at the house I had just been knocking on. Nobody had answered because there was nobody there. The order had been placed to that address to get me to that door, to get me facing away from my car for exactly the time that was needed. The order had been a tool. The customer did not exist. The food was never going to be delivered to anyone. It was a mechanism to position me somewhere specific with my back turned for a timed window. I called the police. I filed a report. I was told this was a known pattern in the area, that it had happened to other drivers, that the platform had been notified before, that it was an ongoing issue. I asked why the platform had not sent any warnings to drivers in the area. The answer I got was not satisfying. I stopped delivering in that area after that. I stopped leaving anything in my car at all. I started checking back over my shoulder every time I walked to a door. I started noting which way my car was facing, so I could see it from the doorstep. I developed habits that I now do automatically. The way you develop habits after something teaches you that the world contains a specific kind of danger you had not previously accounted for. The thing that stays with me is the simplicity of it. Not the fear exactly, not the anger, though both of those were present. The simplicity, the elegance of using an ordinary, trustworthy, everyday app to manufacture exactly the right conditions for what they needed. A fake order, a real driver, a front door 40 feet from a car, 45 seconds. That is all it required. And somewhere out there, right now, as delivery drivers navigate their routes, there is someone who understands those 45 seconds just as clearly. And they are waiting for the next driver to park and walk to a door. I need to tell you about the man who sat in the parking lot with a gun, pointed out the window for 20 minutes, waiting for one of us to come outside. I need to tell you this because it is the kind of thing that happens and then gets described in a single sentence. There was a guy with a gun, and the single sentence doesn't carry what it felt like to be inside that building, low on the floor, watching a truck circle from the windows. This happened when I was working at a pizza place in a rough area of Tucson, Arizona. I want to be clear about the area because the area mattered. This was a location where you learned quickly what to watch for and what to take seriously, where the drivers had a kind of informal education passed between shifts about which addresses were fine and which ones you did not go back to alone, where the phrase "I don't want to do that run" was understood and respected without requiring explanation. We had been dealing with an escalating customer complaint that evening. A man had ordered a large pizza. The delivery had been made by another driver, and almost immediately the phone rang. The man said the pizza was inedible, too spicy, he said, which was genuinely impossible given what had been ordered, but we remade it. My boyfriend was the one who took the second pizza out. He was 22 years old. He came back with the report that the man had been aggressive at the door, that the aggression had felt unstable, the kind that is not ordinary customer frustration, but something with a different quality underneath it. We noted it, we moved on. 20 minutes later, the man was in our parking lot, and he was not parking, he was driving slow circles around the building. Our manager saw it first. He went to the window and watched, and then he turned around and told us all very quietly to get away from the windows and get toward the back of the building. And then he said the word gun. He had seen it as the truck passed, the arm out the window, the angle of it, the shape of what was in the hand. So we went low. The waitress started crying. My manager was reaching up blind to try to get the phone off the counter, to call 911, without exposing himself to the window line. I was on the floor behind the counter. My boyfriend was somewhere behind me. I could hear the truck outside, the engine, the crunch of the parking lot, circling, not leaving. Every so often, one of us would raise high enough to look and then drop back down. The truck was still there, still moving, and then it stopped. It pulled into the far end of the lot, next to the cars of the staff who had driven to work that night, including my boyfriend's car. We watched through the bottom edge of the window. The truck was parked, engine still running, nobody getting out, just sitting, facing the building entrance. My manager got 911 on the line. He was telling them what was happening in a voice that was doing considerable work to stay level. We waited. The longest part of something like that is the waiting, the not knowing whether the thing will happen, and the not being able to do anything about it either way. The specific helplessness of bodies on a floor behind a counter, hoping that nothing comes through the door. The police arrived. The truck left before they got to it, accelerating out of the lot as they turned in. They did not catch him. We filed reports. We stayed behind locked doors for another hour. And then, because that is what you do in a job like that, in an area like that, most of us went back to work. I want to tell you what I thought about on the drive home that night. I thought about how quickly it escalated. A food complaint, a remade pizza, a man who found something in that ordinary transaction worth coming back to the building with a gun about. I thought about what we could not have done differently. We handled the complaint correctly. We remade the order. We did not argue. We were polite. None of it mattered, because what was happening in that man's mind that night had already moved past the pizza. The pizza was just the mechanism that got him to us. What he came back to the parking lot with was something that had been there before the first phone call. We just happened to be the delivery address, and I thought about my boyfriend's car, parked next to the truck. For 20 minutes. I thought about that for a long time on the drive home. I still think about it sometimes.